All right, this is where we're at, Mr. Kohlhepp. My sergeant served a search warrant on your property.
Okay.
We have Kayla.
Excuse me?
We have Kayla. She was locked in a container. You're under arrest.
This man, Todd Kohlhepp, is a rapist and a serial killer. He's killed 7 people that we know of.
What was that like for you? Mechanical. It's the same thing as basically washing my car or taking the trash out.
When Kayla Brown is released from a shipping container, the world finds out about his murderous past.
We're gonna get you out of there, okay?
You bring Kayla in here and this is where he could chain her.
My name is Maria Oz. I'm a filmmaker and investigative journalist. I get to know Todd and those connected to his case.
It was just a parent's nightmare. You don't know where to turn.
What kind of a person does this?
A sick individual. Evil. Definitely evil.
Everyone wonders if there are more victims out there. He tells me there are.
The body count is not even close to accurate.
Are you saying that it's more than 7?
Considerably.
So I start a dark journey that I hope will lead me to the truth. This just makes me sick to my stomach. I gotta get out of here. On November 3rd, 2016, a young woman is rescued from a shipping container in South Carolina. The story soon goes nationwide.
A horrifying discovery in South Carolina.
Investigators swarmed a sprawling compound.
Watch out. Y'all move.
Just a girl.
Just a girl, just a girl. How are you, honey? This is cutters. This is our best. He's a paramedic. Okay, we're gonna get you out of there, okay? Just hang loose, woman.
Kayla Brown, missing for 2 months in rural Spartanburg County, South Carolina, is found alive after 65 days of captivity.
It was pretty emotional, to say the least, when she was found, especially, when she was chained like a dog. She had a chain around her neck.
From day one, you realized, okay, this is a big deal. She was, quote, chained up like a dog. That's kind of a really rare quote to get from a sheriff.
It's the biggest story in years for this part of South Carolina, and it escalates in a heartbeat when Kayla tells her rescuers that the man who held her hostage, Todd Kohlhepp, has killed her boyfriend, Charlie Carver.
Do you know where your buddy is?
Charlie?
Yes.
He shot him.
He shot him? Who did? Who's?
Todd Kohlhepp shot Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, locked me down here, and I never seen him again.
Charlie Carver's grave is discovered 1 day later on Todd's property. The story piques my interest right from the beginning, but my direct involvement comes about because someone at my production company has a cousin who actually worked with Todd Kohlhepp, the man who had kept Kayla Brown in a shipping container and who, it would turn out, had murdered at least 7 people. Through that connection, I would gain access to Todd Kohlhepp and his strange story. When local law enforcement rescues Kayla, all most people know is that the mystery of her and Charlie Carver's disappearance has finally been solved. 2 months earlier, officers had gone to Kayla and Charlie's place in Anderson. They found a messy apartment and Kayla's little dog, but no clues suggesting what had happened to them.
I started covering the disappearance of Kayla Brown and Charlie Carver about 2 weeks after they went missing. At that time, no one knew who Todd Kohlhepp was.
The 45-year-old man is best known in the Spartanburg area for being an accomplished real estate broker. and is never considered a suspect when Charlie and Kayla first disappear.
For 2 months, they were missing, and there were stories about them. Friends had posted flyers, have you seen her, help find her.
Using social media and cell phone data, investigators eventually tracked Kayla and Charlie to Todd Kohlhepp's property. Todd had hired them to clear brush on his land. Detective Tom Clark, formerly an investigator with the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office, is one of the first people I meet when I travel to Spartanburg County to cover the case. On November 3rd, 2016, Clark is brought in to assist in serving a warrant on Todd at his house, while other investigators search his wooded property. What were you told about them initially?
All I was told initially was that Kayla's cell phone had activity on the property that was owned by Todd in Woodruff the day that she disappeared.
All of the footage you will see plays out on an officer's body camera when local authorities go to Todd's house to investigate. No one, least of all Tom Clark, has any idea that he is about to encounter a serial killer.
We have a search warrant, okay? For your residence and your car.
Okay. Step inside so we can share in your business out here.
Taz, she's gonna pee.
No, nervous.
Calm down. Calm down. This is my ferocious attack dog. Yeah.
As you're watching this, you can easily imagine Todd trying to work out a plausible story.
This is where we're at, so I'll explain this a little more in detail to you. Thanks, you're scaring the hell out of me. No, this is these people have not been seen since they were at your property. Okay? So we, you were essentially were the last person to have any contact with them. Their family, friends, no one has had any contact with them since you had contact with them. Mom, dad, cousins, uncles, best friends.
Todd says Kayla Brown and her boyfriend had come out to do some work on his land, then left.
He had said she left shortly after arriving at his property, and her phone put her on the property much later than that.
Why would you say that she was only there an hour and a half when she was there pretty much the whole afternoon?
I don't have an answer for you, sir.
After a period of time, Investigator Gaddy, who was my partner at the time, his phone was just going crazy. He steps outside. He comes back in and he tells me, "You need to call Sergeant Letterman right now." Sergeant Letterman then informs me that they had found Kayla Brown and that she was alive and that she was on the property.
When you heard them say that they'd found Kayla, what went through your mind?
Shock. When I was told where they had found her and how she was found, shock. The weight of the situation, the gravity of the situation was starting to take effect.
It turns out Kayla Brown's rescue is just the beginning of a bigger story. Once unchained, she has more to say. It wasn't just Charlie Carver. Todd has killed more people. A lot more people.
He says there's several bodies dead and buried out here.
And Todd's list of kills doesn't end there.
All right, this is where we're at, Mr. Kohlhepp. While we were here, all right, my sergeant served a search warrant on your property. Okay? We have Kayla.
Excuse me?
We have Kayla in your property. She was locked in a container. Okay? She has told us that you shot and killed Charlie. You're under arrest right now for kidnapping.
And at that point, he was transported to the detention center when he asked for a lawyer.
Authorities immediately start searching for the other victims Todd told Kayla about. But it won't be until Todd is sitting in the interrogation room that we learn who they are. Johnny and Megan Coxey. Another local couple missing for over a year. Another couple Todd hired to do work for him, this time cleaning rental properties. So now authorities know that Todd, besides sexually assaulting and imprisoning Kayla for 65 days, has most likely killed 3 people.
In reference to the other 2 people that we talked about down there, Megan and Johnny, is there anything that we need to know?
Todd's response is revealing.
The land is supposed to be my sanctuary. Yeah, not my killing field.
But his land, the 95-acre property Todd owns, has in fact become just that, a killing field. How did the killing begin? After hiring the Coxeys to do maintenance work in December of 2015, Todd claims Johnny Coxey pulls a knife on him, so he shoots him. And after keeping Megan captive in the same container he later used to house Kayla, he shoots her too.
How everything developed. It was like a roller coaster. I realized how big it was when I came back out to the property, and that whole front fence was nothing but vans and CNN and NBC, ABC, and I'm getting phone calls from NBC New York and people wanting to talk, wanting to interview. It was overwhelming, to say the least. I knew he had a past. I never imagined that we were fixing to step into the hornet's nest that we did.
I'm gonna close a few cases for you. Media's gonna be up late tonight.
Spartanburg County, Todd Kohlhepp's killing ground, is made up of 13 cities and towns, many rural and remote, like Woodruff, where Todd owned his wooded land.
Woodruff is even more so into that small town atmosphere. So when this happened, particularly in that area of Woodruff, I mean, this was something that really changed the entire makeup of the town. You know, I mean, I don't think it'll ever be the same way again. This is the type of story that you only think about maybe covering one day. You realize that this is going to be kind of your life for the foreseeable future. This will be your lifelong case.
There's no question the town of Spartanburg is affected by Todd's crimes. Walking through the city, I can't find anyone who doesn't know who Todd Kohlhepp is. And while people are surprised that a local realtor got away with the crimes in Woodruff for so long, they're shocked at what he confesses to next. Even more murders.
As soon as you get one thing figured out, okay, we've got Kayla, who I don't think after missing that long anybody expected her to be alive. And then it segueing into finding Charlie, and then Johnny and Megan Coxey, and then that dominoing into superbikes.
It's Kayla Brown who first tells investigators that Todd killed 4 people at the Superbike Motorsports shop.
Walked into a bike shop at Anderson and shot 4 people and left, and they never found out who did it. He liked to brag that he was a serial killer and a mass murderer.
Superbike is the area's biggest cold case until Todd Kohlhepp's confession 13 years later, almost to the day.
One of the most notorious cold cases in the upstate is Superbike murders.
4 people were shot and killed inside that motorcycle shop.
Todd confesses to the killings during his interrogation. Not only that, he brags about it a number of times. It's eerie to listen to.
I said my golf game was weak, my kill game is strong.
I cleared that building in under 30 seconds. I'm sorry, but you guys would have been proud.
When he said that he thought that we would be proud of him, I'm like, I can't believe this guy. What in this world, you know, takes me down to your level to make you think that I would be proud of you for what you're telling me you did and how fast you did it.
It's an almost unfathomable crime. Owner Scott Ponder, Ponder's mother and bookkeeper Beverly Guy, shop manager Brian Lucas, and the mechanic Chris Sherbert are all shot to death in a matter of minutes.
We signed 4 warrants on Todd Kohlhepp today with a confession that he did this crime.
No one ever expected that Todd Kohlhepp was the person that committed Superbike Motorsports. To have that solved on top of a story where you have a serial killer, you know, in Spartanburg, that was a huge announcement, a huge deal.
No DNA or fingerprints are ever recovered from the scene of the Superbike murders. The killer seems to vanish without a trace. At the time, the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office seeks the help of the FBI's maverick pioneer of criminal profiling, John Douglas, asking him to create a profile of the Superbike killer. Known as the Mind Hunter, he's interviewed killers like Manson, Bundy, Dahmer, and the Unabomber, using what he's learned from them to develop suspects in unsolved cases. What do you remember specifically about the case?
When I received the case, it was a mass murder. Why was this crime perpetrated? Why these victims? Why this motorcycle shop on this specific day? Whoever this on-sub is, we call him the unknown subject, was mission-oriented. He went in there hell-bent on killing all these people. I did not see that there was one specific victim. It's that they all had to die. All these people had to die. This was a statement. This was a statement against the shop. In seconds, maybe 45 seconds, it would have been over, and he would have been, on his way. It's not a type of case like other serial killers who I've interviewed, where it's a fantasy. This is revenge. This is retaliation.
More than a decade goes by, and law enforcement efforts never find the Superbike killer. But in retrospect, the profile seems to fit Todd Kohlhepp like a glove. John Douglas's original profile of the Superbike killer says the shooter was enraged. Pissed off is the actual quote. He had a beef with the company, not just one person. It wasn't a robbery. That was evident by the large amount of cash left at the store. And when it was all over, that killer, who we now know is Todd Kohlhepp, went back to his normal life, at least for a while. Writer Gary Garrett is in the unique position of being someone who knew Todd Kohlhepp around the time of the Superbike murders, when he was allegedly living as normal a life as possible.
When I met Todd, it was probably late 2004, which would have been almost a year since the 2003 motorcycle shop murders. I just started a new job, and one of his friends worked at the company, and she introduced us. We hung out a little bit. In 2006, he obtained his real estate license. So his time kind of got divided. It takes a lot of effort to get a business going, and he had started Todd Kohlhepp and Associates. He went out on his own. Lives kind of took divergent paths, and it wasn't until 2012 that they kind of started coming back together.
Gary goes to work for Todd Kohlhepp and Associates as a real estate agent in 2012.
Told me about his company and what he had to offer, and it sounded like a good opportunity for me. He had a number of odd quirks about his personality, and they didn't really make sense to me until he was arrested. That he filibustered conversations. He talked a lot, but he talked about very finite, tiny details about things, about weapons, about airplanes. He knew so much detail about these two subjects. Late August, I wasn't liking with the direction that the company seemed to be going. It felt like business was faltering. So August 22nd, I kind of gave Todd an ultimatum. I said, I need more business or I've got to find something else to do. And then in September 23rd, I called him up and let him know I was leaving. He didn't seem to be mad when I quit. He seemed to be almost resigned, like maybe he expected it. I told him I needed to go do something else to make some money. And he was like, okay, cool. If you ever want to hang out, you give me a call.
Thinking back to the profile of the superbike killer that John Douglas came up with, a pissed-off man with a vendetta against the shop, a man out for revenge, I want to know, does Gary think it fits the Todd he knows?
I know he had purchased a motorcycle from there, and I know that he had had a motorcycle stolen. He had speculated that somehow someone involved with the shop had stolen his motorcycle.
It sounds like a strange claim, but it's what Todd alleges. After Gary quit, he didn't hear from Todd again until he had been arrested for Kayla Brown's abduction and the murders of 7 people. Then he contacted Gary and asked him to be his biographer.
I know people are going to look down at me as the man collaborating with a killer. I want to understand Todd. I want to understand the situation. I want other people to.
As an investigative journalist, I want to understand more about Todd, too. I said earlier that I was offered special access to Todd Kohlhepp. Gary Garrett is how that access came about. After Todd reached out to Gary to become his biographer, Gary reached out to me. Todd had sent Gary a series of postcards from jail after he was taken into custody. One even has a smiley face on it.
Seeing that smiley face from this person who's a killer was a little unsettling. It was strange.
Here's Gary reading one of Todd's postcards over the phone to me and my investigative team.
Hey Gary, what up, man? Welcome to my roller coaster. Yeah, I messed up big time, but they have only 10% of the story, and no way I'll get a fair trial with Facebook going nuts and keeping me from telling public what really was going on. So want to help me write a book in a year or so and drop a written bomb?
Gary and I, in fact our whole team, want to know what Todd means about the public only knowing 10% of the story. What is the other 90% that he's referring to? Could he mean he's killed more people? It's a sobering possibility. Over how long of a period was he killing people?
You have a motorcycle shop murder, which is where he murdered 4 people.
Right.
That was in 2003. And then in 2015, he killed Johnny Coxey and his wife. That would have been in December, right before Christmas, or right at the Christmas time. And then Charlie Carver in August. So those are the 7 there.
Has he talked about why he didn't kill anyone else between 2003 and 2015?
No, I have a theory on that.
And where is he now? What is the name of the facility?
Spartanburg County Detention Center. So he's been charged with 7 counts of murder and 1 rape charge and 2 or 3 kidnapping charges.
Gary offers to make the introductions and get Todd to talk to me. It will be a phone call at first, not an in-person interview. That's Todd's preference. Gary, who knows Todd well, advises me to keep the tone of the call cordial. That will be a challenge. I'm talking to a self-admitted serial killer.
This is a Global Tel-Link prepaid call from
Todd,
an inmate at South Carolina Department of Corrections.
Hi, Todd. This is Maria with Committee Films. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I think Gary talked to you about this, but we're going to record this call, so I just need to ask your permission to record this call for broadcasting. So do you give me permission to do that?
Yes, ma'am. You have my permission.
Okay, great. Thank you. I guess my main questions for you are going to be about what you are hoping here.
My biggest motivation to any of this is the story that the media is telling is incorrect.
Okay.
I'm not going to come off as noble. The bodies are mine. I'm not going to say those are not. But an awful lot of the stuff behind it that comes out day by day is not even remotely close. And they've only got about 10% of the story. And of the 10%, it's wrong.
What are some of the things you'd like to correct?
The body count is not even close to accurate.
The body count's not close to accurate. Okay.
It's not 7.
It's not 7. Okay, and are you saying that it's more than 7?
Considerably.
Considerably more than 7.
Things have happened before that actually set this off to begin with. There's stuff before the bike shop, and there's considerably after the bike shop. There's not a lot. I'll take the blame for what I did. There are others.
There's other people who were involved in some of these incidents?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you think that there would be a day when you would be caught?
I knew I was caught the moment I shot Charlie.
I see. And why is that?
Because none of it was planned. And I was stuck with dealing with him and then trying to figure out what to do with Kayla.
Todd goes on to make some shocking statements about Kayla Brown and the time she spent as his captive.
Kayla was never taken to be a sex slave. There was no intent to take her as a hostage, as a slave, as anything improper. I have no problems with them finding her. I honestly wish her the best. But the story that they've got out is entirely incorrect, and I can actually prove it.
You can? How could you do that?
Well, for one, she actually wrote letters. I gave her a pad and a pen. I told her that I would buy anything she wanted to make her stay there easier. If she would just basically follow the rules of behaving, don't attack me, don't escape. Try to behave while I try to figure out what in the world to do with you. The letters are part of evidence. Therefore, law enforcement has them. One of her comments on there that, just her luck, that she got a killer with a conscience, kidnapper with morals. Kayla Brown was not raped in the storage building, except for the fact that I shot Charlie, that she likes it out here. Excuse the comment, but she wanted more sex.
You said you didn't rape her in the storage container.
May be recorded or monitored. I never raped her.
You never raped her at all, or in the storage container?
I never raped her ever.
Ever. So you're saying that was consensual?
Barry, in her letters, stated and requested. Like I said, I'm not saying she's not a victim. I'm saying she's not the victim that she portrays.
What level of remorse do you have for what you've done? Can you answer that?
I'm sorry for what happened. I'm mostly sorry to the victim's kids.
Okay.
Not going to be with their parent. I mean, it's turned into 50 Shades of Grey with bodies. I'm sorry for the kids mostly of all.
When I get off the phone with Todd, my mind is spinning. It's horrifying thinking about what he did to his victims. I have problems with giving a serial killer like Todd a voice, but what if he hadn't said any of this to police? And like his victim Kayla allegedly said, does he really have a conscience and want to confess to more killings? Then again, what if he's just grandstanding or just trying to get attention? No matter what, there's no question. Our team needs to find out if he's killed more people.
Todd saying that there's more bodies it's one of those things that it doesn't feel real. It feels like somebody that's saying something because what does he have to lose? Let me puff my chest out. There's more bodies. It's something that is actually, there are more bodies out there. If there are, this is our opportunity to help families know what happened to their loved ones.
Todd Kohlhepp has made quite a claim, to me directly, that there are considerably more than the 7 victims he is currently charged with killing. Todd tells me that on May 26, 2017, he intends to stand before the Spartanburg County Court and plead guilty. He'll accept 7 life sentences for committing these heinous crimes. The killing of Johnny and Megan Coxey and Charlie Carver on his wooded property. And to the county's biggest cold case, a quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports in 2003. This is a man bold enough to post Amazon reviews, rating items he's bought, shovels to keep in the car for burying bodies, and locks to slow people down.
He had put things out there that were actually kind of saying what he was doing when he was really doing it, but it was almost like no one would actually believe that he's doing these things. And he was posting these things for probably 2 years, and now we know that he was actually really was doing what he was posting on those Amazon reviews.
His just disregard for human life stood out the most to me, and how it just would roll off his tongue that I killed these people, that I did this. That stood out the most to me. He liked people to be impressed by him, by his achievements, by his accomplishments, by his education, by his wit, and by his brain. That's what my concept of Todd is.
Todd has been open with me on the phone, but I want to interview him in person before his court hearing in South Carolina. I want to confront him about the murders we know about and push him harder on his story that Kayla Brown had not been raped. And most of all, I feel compelled to follow up on the insinuation that he's killed more people. 9 days before Todd's plea hearing, a producer and I sign up online to visit him in the Spartanburg County Jail, and Gary Garrett comes along at Todd's request. I have to enter my driver's license information, and they give me a time when I can do the interview. Then I ask the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office 3 questions. Can I film or audio record the interview with Todd? Can I interview the sheriff? Or will he at least agree to meet with me? The answer to all 3 questions is no. But I'm still going to interview Todd without recording, because no one tells me that is prohibited.
All right, so I'm here. This is the first time I'm gonna actually meet Todd, and I guess it's by video screen. We aren't allowed to film in there. We did request to film in there. So what I'm planning to do is just introduce myself. He's expected to plead guilty on Friday, so I wanna get some details about that, what he's gonna be sentenced to. But primarily, he says that there's 90% of the story that we don't know. There were considerably, he said the word considerably more people that he had killed. Obviously, we want to know about that, but really just, I think this meeting is more about him getting comfortable with me, asking him questions. So we will see what he has to say.
Even though we're not allowed to record the interview, we found out later the jail did, so it exists on tape. The jail didn't give it to me, but Todd's attorney did, so that's the video you'll see. I lay on the charm, because if I'm ever going to get Todd to trust me, he's going to need to like me.
Hi, Todd. Hey. Hi, this is Maria, and I have Gary here. I don't know if you can see him or not, but he came with me today.
I can.
Where are you at, sort of, with everything?
At the end of the day, you're still going to condemn me and put me in prison for the rest of my life, but at least it's for the right reasons. There's no way I'm going to make it right, but the thing is, I'd like at least people to understand why, what happened, what really happened.
So it's not that you're denying what happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's more truth behind what happened. That's what you want people to understand and to know.
Yes, ma'am. There's a lot more what happened, how we got up to this. At the end of the day, I'm not the hero. Okay? I'm not going to come off as a white knight. I'm not going to come off as a good guy. I'm still going to come off as, I'm glad you're in prison and you're not near me. They won't release me. This is not going to do anything to get me out of here. There will be no other trial. There will be no reduction of sentence. My last day will be in this place.
Beyond what you hear, Todd says a lot of other things in this interview at the jail. He gives insight into the killings and how he feels going into the plea deal.
I think that's another way for you to get this story out there. Okay. Sorry, they're talking to us out here.
I'm supposed to have a full 30 minutes with Todd, but suddenly the guard appears. I hand the phone to Gary so I can figure out what is going on.
Just like they're trying to kick us out of here. No, they just didn't want us here. They didn't want us. Oh, why? Because of who we are.
Okay. Sorry, they're talking to us out here.
I will find out later that Todd told me he was going to plead guilty to the 7 counts of murder he was charged with before he'd actually told the prosecution team. And that doesn't sit well with anyone at the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office.
They're nervous as hell about the media because, I mean, this is the kind of that makes and breaks careers, turn around and interfere with anybody's career. I gotta go. Talk to you later. All right, talk to you later.
In the video, it's a little hard to hear, but basically, I'm told I can't talk to Todd.
Nothing to do with him at all. Come down here on the pretense. Not the pretense. Not the. Or under any pretense. He has indicated that he wants to talk to us. Right. Okay.
In the end, we're asked to leave.
I would say it's a fair statement to say that the Sheriff's Department employees who were there were pretty aggressive in telling us that they didn't believe we had permission to do what we were doing. Lieutenant Bobo, who is the public information officer for the Sheriff's Department, he said we could not audio or video record it, which we didn't. We didn't do any of that.
The story is now, for us, one-sided. It's coming from the perpetrator. And so it makes me more curious of why they're being so tight-lipped about it. Are they afraid?
What's frustrating for me is, you know, we have this individual who says there's 90% of his story that isn't out there. I don't know what that 90% is. I don't know if he's telling the truth. I don't know if he's grandstanding. I don't know. But I also feel like there's an obligation to try to figure that out.
Todd Kohlhepp is scheduled to appear inside of this courtroom this morning here in Spartanburg County.
Families, law enforcement authorities are expecting closure today.
In court, Todd will plead guilty to gunning down 4 people who all worked at Superbike Motorsports in Chesney, South Carolina in 2003, along with killing Johnny and Megan Coxey and Charlie Carver and kidnapping and sexually assaulting Kayla Brown. The sentencing will be the first time I get to meet any of the families I would get to know so well.
That was a really emotional day. I've been in court many times in that courthouse and in that courtroom and never quite seen the spectacle that had that day. Parents, family members, relatives, they would get up and, you know, one by one just either just speak from the heart or some of them prepared statements that they had written down.
I asked Todd about the families in the interview before we had to cut it short.
What do you think it'll be like if the victims' families read, you know, victim impact statements?
I'm just going to have to stand there and take it.
And that's what happens as family member after family member gets up to speak. Todd shows no emotion, even though many in the courtroom are in tears.
The whole time he was standing up front and just kept his eyes right on the judge while, you know, right near him was, you know, parents and relatives of folks that he had killed in his past. So just seeing that whole dynamic work out and watching that unfold before you was a pretty emotional day.
As to each of the 7 counts of murder, you will receive a life sentence without possibility of parole, and each of those sentences will be consecutive, one to the other. Is that true? Yes. You have also agreed to a sentence of 30 years to run consecutively for the charge of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree. Is that true? Yes. You have also agreed to a sentence of 30 years to run consecutively on the charge of kidnapping. Is that true? Yes. I'll accept the plea to get found guilty in here.
Everybody ready to see it?
When it's all over, there's a press conference. I figured that will be my chance to talk to the sheriff, Chuck Wright, since all media is invited. During the hearing, Tom Lucas, the father of Superbike victim Brian Lucas, implored Kohlhepp to come clean if there are any more victims.
I honestly believe there's other victims that have not been identified yet. And I make a plea to the defendant, and those families are waiting for justice for their loved ones. If there are people, please come clean.
Todd has told me there are more victims, but I don't know whether to believe him. I want to ask the sheriff, what does he think? His response is unexpected. In all of the conversations you've had with him, you're confident that there aren't any other victims?
You're wearing a nice dress. I ain't gonna answer that one.
Then just like that, he's gone. And I'm left standing there in my nice dress.
Sheriff Wright inherited this case. He inherited a case that was a powder keg. It's always been a powder keg. It's a sticky situation for a lot of people that live here, a lot of people that knew the families involved, for the families involved, and then your Monday morning quarterbacks, your sideline coaches. So anything that he says or anything that he does is going to be second guessed, is going to be scrutinized to the nth degree.
Do you think the sheriff should talk? Should put an end to some of these questions?
I think that would be a question for the sheriff.
The more detail you gather, the more you start to realize how much there is to work on. It didn't take long to realize that there was just way more notes on everything than could ever fit into a newspaper article or anything like that.
Who knows what's going to happen with this case, but I think that it's not an open and closed case. I mean, it's only the beginning, I think.
Do you think Todd Kohlhepp has more victims?
Yes, I think Todd Kohlhepp has killed other people.
Do you think we'll ever know who those people are?
If Todd wants you to, you'll know.
Just to recap, 6 months after Kayla Brown is freed from a shipping container in 2016, serial killer Todd Kohlhepp pleads guilty to killing 7 people. 4 at the Superbike motorcycle shop in 2003, Johnny and Megan Coxey in 2015, and Kayla's boyfriend Charlie Carver in 2016 on the property Todd owns in rural South Carolina. He also pleads guilty to sexually assaulting and kidnapping Kayla Brown. With no chance of appeal, Todd will be spending the rest of his life inside. I still want to go to the prison and do a sit-down interview, the one I wasn't able to do before his sentencing. So I request one through the South Carolina Department of Corrections. Here's the question I really want to ask Todd. Who are the other victims he claims to have killed? The ones that law enforcement doesn't even know about. For me not to follow up, both from a journalist standpoint, never mind a personal one, seems negligent. As it turns out, Todd wants to be in touch too, and he writes me from prison. So I got this letter today. It's September 8th, 2017. Dear Maria, seriously not liking statewide protective custody. I don't fit in at all. Most are gang members that screwed up or screwed over so many, everyone wants to kill them. I was wondering how the families are doing. I really am sorry for what they had to go through and still only know bits and pieces. I know it might be a while before I will be able to do an interview with Todd in person at the prison, so we arranged to talk on the phone. For our first call since the sentencing, I decide to table my questions about others he might have killed. Instead, I want to gain a better understanding of how he became what he is now, a convicted serial killer. So I ask him about his childhood and his preteen years. At that point, Todd's mother has been married twice, and when the second marriage fails, she sends him to live on his grandparents' farm. Like many serial killers, Todd says he was severely abused as a child. What are some of your earliest memories that you have?
You were to be seen, not heard. From about the time I was 5, Grandpa thought it was fun to shock me or my mother with a cattle prod.
Oh my gosh.
And he'll just walk by, walk up to you, put the probes on you, hit the button. And you get shot, you wiggle, you scream. It's not fun. It's definitely not for humans. I have no love for my family.
Besides being a victim, Todd is described as a bully from nursery school on, hitting his classmates and destroying their school projects. He's held back a grade, referred to a psychologist, and even committed to a mental hospital.
By the time I was 10, they put me in the Georgia State Mental Health Institute for a couple months, where it was basically kind of like juvie. They gave everybody so much Thorazine and amitriptyline that you didn't remember where you were.
Todd returns to his mother's house after that hospitalization. His relationship with his mother, Regina Tague, continues to be a complicated one. He blames her for his tumultuous childhood, and their relationship runs hot and cold. Even so, it's his mom who he chooses to call after his arrest for Kayla Brown's abduction and assault, even though he hasn't spoken to her in years. What he ends up telling her is truly a mother's worst nightmare.
You kept her chained for 2 months. What?
I didn't know what to do with her.
Why did you have her in the first place?
Things got out of hand. I'm just done some real messed up.
Huh?
The bad part hasn't even come out yet.
Did you kill some people?
A bunch of them.
Todd? What's the bunch, Todd?
You don't have enough fingers.
How long has this been going on?
Years. They're going to keep pulling bodies off that land.
You know everything in the world, don't you?
I did. And I just threw it all away.
Decades before his crimes were discovered, when he's 12 years old, Todd demands that his mother let him move in with his birth father, hoping life will be different.
She informed me that I couldn't move, couldn't go live with my dad because I had brand new furniture. I was mad. I just smacked everything with a hammer. Hit the table, hit the dresser. I bent a piece of the headboard. I was mad and I wanted to leave.
Todd ultimately gets his wish, moving out in 1984, hoping for a new beginning with his dad. Soon, Todd grows to despise him too, saying he's irresponsible and cruel. But there are 2 sides to every story. His father agrees to talk with me, even though he has never spoken before about his son.
None of the behavioral problems was shared with me at all. He started off a fairly decent foot with me. I started buying him model planes. Todd expressed an interest in airplanes and the military, and that somewhere along the line he'd like to be a pilot. He had a dog, Alex, and was the dog's name, and Alex and Todd were inseparable. He basically behaved. Over a period of time, things started shifting, though. His way of dealing with people and trying to be overbearing and bullying type, that was something that really bothered me. And more or less stated he was having trouble or he couldn't seem to find friends. And I pointed out straight out that you can't have friends if you don't want to be a friend.
Todd's father tells me he tried to steer Todd in the right direction. From teaching him how to make friends to checking in regularly with his teachers. He also says he made sure Todd did his homework every day in the booth of the barbecue restaurant he opened just to be close to home.
Welcome to Billy's Famous for Ribs. They're straight from Chicago and you'll love them.
Most often I was with him in the evenings.
Now, Todd has painted a bit of a different picture for me of his time with you, indicating that you really weren't around. What do you
I'm glad
say?
you brought that up because that is totally untrue. There was not one night that I spent away from the house and it was not where he was unsupervised. Todd made up a lot of things.
Why do you think Todd lies?
I don't really have a clue. I do feel terribly bad for the loved ones and people, the families that he affected, because they were all victims. He is just one very sick person. And it's good that he's incarcerated. He no longer has the ability to harm society.
When I asked Todd about what his father has said during our phone call, he has this come back.
He ran around doing whatever he was doing. I never saw him. He wasn't calling my teachers. Me and him did not bond. We didn't do models with each other. He was doing what he wanted to do, and I was just happened to be there along for the ride.
Both of his parents indicated that Todd had behavioral issues even as a child, but I want to understand more about his psychology. John Douglas created a profile of the Superbike killer back in 2004, before Todd confessed to the murders, and he's since reviewed a court-ordered psychological report compiled about him as a teen. Would Kohlhepp have become this violent offender if his childhood and teenage years would have been different?
Todd's childhood, it was not a happy type of childhood. What's shaping a child is the mother and father in a relationship, in a loving nature, nurturing type of relationship. Todd Kohlhepp, that's very similar to other cases. You generally don't see this kind of early childhood support, nurturing, encouragement going on. He just rebelled against everything. I personally believe that Kohlhepp was salvageable. He could have been saved.
But that isn't what happened. Whatever the truth is about Todd's early life, his childhood comes to a horrific and violent end on November 25th, 1986. The one night his dad says he left him home alone with only a neighbor to supervise.
In 1986, I was a patrol officer with the Tempe Police Department. There was an officer that had responded to a welfare check, and there had been a sexual assault. I interviewed the victim. She was a young girl. She was 14 years old. And she explained that a neighbor boy had lured her out of her house, and then once he got her into the alley, he pulled a gun on her and walked her back to his house, where he raped her.
That young girl's rapist is a 15-year-old Todd Kohlhepp. He's just committed his first act of violence. Tempe, Arizona police officer Betsy Cable takes me to the neighborhood where Todd Kohlhepp raped his 14-year-old neighbor over 30 years ago. The brutality of the assault is something she remembers to this day.
So that's the house. The gate is here at the end of the yard. And he walked her down into his house where he tied her up, put duct tape over her mouth, and assaulted her. I never had a suspect as young as this one who employed all of the techniques that he did with the rope, the duct tape, the gun. That was pretty intense.
Todd's first known victim, Christy, has never spoken publicly about her rape. It takes me months of building a level of trust to get her to take down the walls she built to protect herself and speak publicly. Even over 30 years later, the terror of her assault is still fresh.
November 25th, 1986, I was babysitting. I had a younger brother and sister. They were 5 and 3 at the time. I was studying chemistry that night on the love seat couch. And I heard the front doorbell ring. And Todd was there. And he said, there was a boy that I thought was cute. He said that this boy was around the corner and he wanted to talk to me. I said, well, I can't come out. I'm babysitting and I'm not allowed to leave the house. And I told him, so, you have to go. So I went back in the house and my brother and sister were sleeping and he continued. He was very persistent. When he had come to the back door, he said, just come out. And I thought, maybe I'll finally get rid of him. And when I got out there, that's when Todd pulled a gun out and took the gun to my head. And he said, you're coming with me. I remember being so angry, but so scared. And I didn't have any shoes on, and I don't know why that's so ingrained in my head, but walking through an alley with glass and rocks and everything, between the fear and the fight or flight in me, what I did was I actually grabbed the barrel of the gun, and he shot it. It misfired.
Oh my goodness.
It did not go off. And had it gone off, he would have shot me in the head.
The accidental misfire spares Christy's life, but little else. Christy's story becomes very graphic and hard for anyone to listen to, including me.
I remember how dark it was and how long the alley was. We entered his house. I remember going down the hallway to the right. It's the last bedroom on the left. I don't know how many bedrooms are in that house, but I know where that bedroom is. He asked me to take off my clothes. I had never taken off my clothes in front of anybody ever before. He tied me up, my hands behind my back, my mouth duct taped across my face. He had a knife, which he had held at my throat, and I had marks from it. He laid on top of me and started to rape me, but first started out by sodomizing me. And I got upset and I told him, I said, you're so stupid that you don't know which place to put it. I told him it hurt.
Meanwhile, Christy's brother realizes Christy isn't in the house and becomes worried. He calls the police. When police cars arrive at her house, Todd notices. He can see their lights at the other end of the block.
And all of a sudden, police lights showed up. He couldn't figure out what to do.
For the first time, but unfortunately not the last, Todd has to make a choice of what to do with a female victim. Will he kill her or let her live?
He took the tape off my mouth. I promised him I wouldn't say anything just to let me go. And he said, no, I have to kill you. And I said, no, I'll tell the police that we were looking for a dog. And I finally convinced him that that's what I would do. He told me that if I said anything, he would kill my brother and my sister and my parents before he killed me. When I got in the gate, my parents were home. The police were there. I walked in the back door. And I told them I was looking for a dog because I was so petrified. And then it just started coming out. God bless my dad. He's the one that talked to me, and he asked, did Todd put his, and he couldn't even say it, put his thing in you? And I started crying, and I said yes.
Police immediately go to Todd's house and take him into custody.
I know he had a gun. I conversed with Todd through the door.
What did he say?
He said, I just need to know, how much am I going to get for this? I really couldn't believe that somebody could be so callous, so matter-of-fact, so blunt, who just committed this horrific crime, and now is the only thing on their mind is, how much time am I going to do? It was dark. I couldn't even see him. While we were talking, I saw this blue glint of like blue steel. And it turns out he had a .22 caliber rifle with him at the door. I remember grabbing at the screen door and pulling my handgun out and just telling him, now, out right now, or I'm gonna shoot you. He could have shot me. He could have killed me. I could have shot him. I could have killed him. But that's not what played out. What played out was he was taken into custody, handcuffs, put in the back of a patrol car.
How did this affect you? I mean, whether it was that night or moving forward?
I often think, wow, if it had played out differently, I might have altered the future for other people. And that makes me feel bad. It really does. But I'm glad I'm standing here.
For the rape in Arizona in 1986, a teenage Todd is sentenced to 15 years in adult prison at a correctional facility called Iman, where he serves his full sentence before moving back to South Carolina and registering as a sex offender. Today, Todd doesn't like to talk about the rape, but it doesn't stop me from asking. Is there anything you would say today to Christy?
I'm sorry. She deserved better. I had a lot of problems back then. I was young. I was foolish. I mean, I was 15 years old. I thought I was in love and had no clue what in the world I was doing and acting out. I entirely was inappropriate. I'm sorry for what I did.
After interviewing Christy, I find this conversation with Todd particularly disturbing. Like much of what he says, the apology doesn't seem to match the intensity and the severity of the crime. Alan Bickert was Todd's attorney on the Tempe case.
Todd Kohlhepp's case, I would say, was one of the most difficult cases I ever had. How many years am I going to get? That was his question. That was the only thing that he was interested in. He lacks empathy for other people. He could take this girl, rape her, take away all of her dignity. Wouldn't faze him in the least. The conclusion was psychopathology.
A court-ordered psychological profile generated after Christy's rape goes into detail about Todd's violent behavior prior to the crime. Specifically, the profile mentions incidents where he's a bully, where he shoots a dog and kills a goldfish with Clorox bleach. But Todd says that's not exactly what happened.
Never shot the dog with a BB gun. That was my neighbor. The goldfish was a mistake. I was told I couldn't go outside till I cleaned the tank. Figured a small amount into the tank would clean it. I wasn't thinking it was going to kill the goldfish.
While John Douglas doesn't dispute the diagnosis of Todd's psychopathology, he raises questions about how some of these incidents actually occurred and whether they fit the profile of a serial killer.
When you look at Todd Kohlhepp, he doesn't fit the typical type of serial killer. In fact, even with one of the things we look at and we found in our research, we refer to as the homicidal triangle. That includes animal cruelty, it includes fire setting, and it includes enuresis, which is bedwetting. Usually, animal cruelty is the biggie. He shot a dog with a BB gun, but he explains that away, and I believe him. He was supposed to clean out a fish tank, so he thought he could expedite matters by putting Clorox in it. No, that's not an animal cruelty or animal torture.
John Douglas isn't surprised that no one actually predicted Todd was going to be a serial killer.
I've done presentations and laid out what you should be concerned about. Kohlhepp did not have any of those things that I saw in his background.
While Todd waits to find out if he'll be tried as an adult for Christy's rape, his mother writes a letter to the probation department, hoping Todd will remain in the juvenile system. In the letter written back then, she says she is scared to death of what he will learn in prison. But it does little to influence the court. He gets 15 years in adult prison, a long time, but far less than the maximum sentence of 40 years. Is there an irony in the fact that if he would have received more time, 40 years, he wouldn't have been out to commit these murders?
I believe that there was more time that the judge had to give him if he wanted to. I'm sure he could have doubled it easily to 30, given the nature of the offense.
Todd has indicated that there are more victims. Do you think that's possible based on the Todd Kohlhepp you met?
He killed 7 people that we know about. I mean, it's a small community. Who's missing?
Do you think he could have been capable of other rapes during that time period?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
While I'm in Arizona looking into Todd's rape conviction, I hear from a retired sex crimes investigator from a neighboring city. He tells me there might be another unsolved Tempe rape I should take a look at. It happened just blocks away from Todd's house, only 16 days before Christy was assaulted back in 1986.
After Todd Kohlhepp's arrest, I received an email from a man who said that his ex-wife had been attacked in Tempe in 1986, and he suspected that Kohlhepp had committed the attack. There was duct tape involved. The two crimes between victim 1 and victim 2, about a 10-minute walk.
Todd Kohlhepp at the time would have been 15 years old and unable to drive, but committing another crime within walking distance of his home would have been possible.
I sent an email to the police chief and suggested that they look into this matter.
After talking to Bill Richardson, it seems completely possible that I've found a new victim. The young woman was in her early 20s and a college co-ed at the time. Even more than 30 years later, she's reluctant to show her face or reveal her name publicly. But she remembers every detail of the night her attacker broke in.
On November 9th, 1986, I had come home to my apartment about 10, 11 o'clock. My one roommate was back in Michigan visiting her parents. So I had come home by myself and had gone to bed, but my other roommate was asleep in the other room. Several hours later, I had awoken to somebody standing over me, somebody tall and lanky, pressing duct tape down over my mouth with quite a bit of force, pushing my head back into the pillow. And I just remember thinking, please don't kill me. Like, that's the line that gets me. Just, please don't kill me. He took my clothes off from the bottom down, so he grabbed the back of my head and put my face into the pillow. And so he raped me. But even as I think back now, it was awkward. It was just the most awkward thing, like he didn't know what he was doing.
When this victim describes her assailant as awkward, I immediately recall Christy describing the same type of fumbling in her assault.
I mean, I don't really know how else to put it. It was just seemed like an awkward, fumbly teenager. In my mind, there's no way that was a grown man.
After what seems like hours to the victim, but is actually only minutes, he suddenly ends the assault.
He took my blanket and threw it all the way over my head and got real close to my ear and he said, "Don't move, don't call the police. I'll come back and kill you because I've been watching you." And left.
I want to know if John Douglas thinks Todd could have been responsible for both rapes. He reviews Christy's rape and that of the second victim.
It was very, very similar in as much as there was duct tape used as well as the bindings on the victim. That's very, very unusual to have two cases like that just blocks away. But then there's other parts of it that you kind of question things. This would have been, this particular victim, a total stranger to him. To go break into this house or maybe just walk through the door and go after this college co-ed while there's other people in other rooms and out in the hallways, that's a certain degree of confidence. You just have to start tacking on some years on the offender.
John Douglas is left with doubts as to whether both rapes were committed by the same man, and if the man in the unsolved case could possibly have been Todd Kohlhepp. But suspicions remain, and unfortunately, they aren't going to be easily settled. Back in 1986, Tempe police arrive at the victim's apartment, taking her statement and collecting evidence. Evidence which has since been destroyed, which she says makes closing her case next to impossible.
As far as the evidence in my case, all my bedding they took, the clothes I was wearing, sheets, blankets, everything, it shows that it had been destroyed 2 years later.
Tempe police tell me that the evidence was kept according to their retention policy at the time, which was 7 years. But the victim says the stamp on her police report says otherwise.
So by 1988, it had been destroyed. There was a big stamp on the page of evidence where it listed everything item by item with a big stamp, destroyed.
When you read that, what did you think?
I was livid. I don't know any statute of limitation that runs out in 2 years. Really, when I saw that, I just thought, wow, they really just didn't do anything about this at all.
Tempe police tell me they've done everything they can to solve the case. But John Douglas believes a golden opportunity may have been lost.
I've never seen a case or heard of a case where this evidence was destroyed in a 2-year period. And I would really question the police what they were thinking. Indoor rape, tape used, and bindings used, sexually assaulted, and in both cases, sexually immature, and no one looks at this case. I mean, what more do you want? I mean, they should have looked at these cases. I don't get it.
In a letter to me, Todd says he didn't rape the victim in Tempe who's come forward, or anyone else there. He says there is zero connection to me and those other Tempe cases. Not me, no matter how long and hard they look. But for most, Todd will never be a reliable truth teller. Do you think it's possible that Todd had other victims, that there are other women who he might have raped?
Yes. I think there's a great likelihood that there are more cases.
What do you think about his claims that there are more bodies?
I'm sure there's more. I would not be surprised if there was some sort of trail from Arizona to South Carolina. I can't imagine dealing with that boy, a 15-year-old boy, as a grown man, wiser, smarter, still with the same mentality.
When I get back to South Carolina, Todd's biographer, Gary Garrett, tells me Todd's defense attorney is giving us files from the case to look through. Included in the files, the letters Kayla wrote to Todd while held captive in the shipping container. Letters he says prove he didn't rape her. It's such a provocative claim. I read every one of Kayla Brown's letters, but I don't have her permission to share exact quotes from them. Gary Garrett and John Douglas also read them. She refers to herself as a sweet kitten. It just kind of seeing the ebb and flow of this, she goes from being sort of resigned, it seems like, to the fact to being really angry, really.
Yeah, she seems to get very angry. She's resigned and then angry and then almost I won't want to say acceptance, but there's a close to acceptance.
The psychology of this is fascinating. Here she's talking about him in a really positive light and wanting him to come back soon and things like that. To me, reading it, I guess, as a woman especially, doing what you would have to do to survive. While weighing Todd's claims he didn't rape Kayla against what I'm reading, I discover something else. Kayla and Todd appear to have had an on and off again sexual relationship before he locked her in the shipping container. Facebook messages between them that have never been shown to the public suggest she's cheating on her boyfriend Charlie Carver and hint at sex with Todd on August 22nd, less than 10 days before the young couple arrives to clear brush on his property and Charlie is killed. In the Facebook messages to Todd, Kayla says, "I'm available on Wednesday night also. He will be leaving for work around 6:30 on Wednesday." Todd replies, "Would love to see you, and not just for a quickie." Kayla then says, "I would be all yours, just let me know." Todd and Kayla's prior relationship also comes up when Tom Clark first confronts Todd at his home.
We know that there was more of a physical relationship between you and Kayla. She was a stripper. My understanding she was very good looking, and she would call you and need money. Yes. And you would give her money, and she'd give you sex. It would work out that way.
While the prior sexual relationship between Kayla and Todd was not part of the news stories after her rescue, Todd reiterates much of this to me in a phone call.
Me and her had actually been fooling around for just about a year.
Okay. Even if there was a previous sexual relationship, Todd could still have raped Kayla while holding her captive. But some of the language in the letters does appear suggestive, and I decide to ask John Douglas about that.
She knows he's going to see it, and it's going to pacify him, hopefully, so that he doesn't kill me. But it's part of this survival identification, they call it. It's very, very common. She is a victim, but in his mind, she did not fight him off, the rape, but it's still rape.
I tell Todd what I think, that Kayla is still a rape victim, and that he's wrong about the letters. Here's his response, which he sends me from jail. I see why you ask the questions of, she did it to survive, but scared people don't ask for vibrators, specific brands of stripper poles, and cuddle time. They try to avoid you and confrontation. Kayla had, in fact, asked in writing for the items Todd mentions, but I don't think that proves anything. Todd continues to assert he has no reason to have remorse about anything sexual that has gone on between them. Once he's made up his mind, it seems that's the only truth there is for him. While I am in South Carolina, there's another area where Todd's credibility, or perhaps his capacity to tell the truth, is called into question. And it isn't one I see coming at all. Gary Garrett happens to stumble into it as he starts the process of writing Todd's biography.
Recently, I've started receiving pages from Todd. I received 16 pages that he had written about Superbike and gave me that whole account, which opened up a lot more questions for me. I can't say whether or not Todd did or did not commit the Superbike murders.
What Gary says shocks me. The confession Todd has given about killing the 4 people at the Superbike motorcycle shop in 2003 seemed airtight at the time, but I want to hear Gary out. And why do you say that? Tell me about that.
After I took Todd's account of Superbike and kind of laid it out with the facts of the case, I was not satisfied with his answers. Todd had motive. He had opportunity. He had all the reason in his mind to commit the crime, but I don't know if he is the actual one that did it.
In trying to match up Todd's account of the 4 murders at the Superbike shop with the actual ballistics evidence found at the crime scene, Gary found some discrepancies, including who was shot with which bullet type. He wonders if Todd Kohlhepp actually killed fewer people than he has said, and whether he's taking credit for crimes he didn't commit, just to be remembered as a more prolific serial killer. In digging through the hours and hours of interrogation footage, I find one audio clip that didn't make the news that raises some serious, legitimate questions about Todd's confession. In this clip, he's being questioned by Spartanburg County Sergeant Mark Gaddy and Detective Tom Clark.
You made a statement about Superbike. You had evidence saying that you didn't do it.
So are you now saying you didn't do it? It doesn't really matter. You're gonna fry me for 3 of them anyhow. So the details that you told us about when you were leaving, things that you did. Dude, that was all already on the internet. I read that. Let me ask you this. Did you do Superbikes? As far as you're aware, yes. What? As far as you're aware, yes. No, I don't want that, Todd.
The exchange ends like so many of Todd's conversations. with more questions than answers.
I want to know the truth. You don't have time for that.
Next time on Serial Killer, Devil Unchained.
911, where's your emergency? Apparently everybody's been shot up here.
All I can see is that door being propped open and seeing my best friends laying out front.
I went there 100% certain that he had committed superbike. By the time I got home, I had dropped it down to 50%.
How do we really know you did it?
If you don't believe me, then don't believe me. I don't care.
He liked to brag that he was a serial killer and a mass murderer.
Do you ever think you could have been in there?
Oh, yeah. He knew how to feed on my emotion. He knew how to capitalize on that.
I said, well, I'm warning you now, that man is nuts. Those people could have been saved if somebody would have listened.